We've made our own cheap products, so goodbye." Those were the sudden words from Daisy, the daughter of the president of a longtime client company.
"I understand. We won't deliver to you ever again,"
I managed to say in a strained voice. Daisy laughed gleefully, clearly pleased with herself. But her laughter won't last long. I returned to my company, determined to get back at her, and began preparing to confront her. The next day, Antonio, the president, showed up looking pale. "My name is Agatha. I lost my husband early on and have been supporting the company he left behind ever since. At first, I struggled as I didn't know what I was doing and things weren't going well. But I knew I couldn't continue like this, so I visited companies my husband had connections with and desperately pleaded with them to teach me the business. I absorbed everything they taught me, and once I gained the recognition of my employees as their president, I studied even harder. My employees supported me in various ways, developing unique technologies and creating hit products for me. I grew increasingly determined never to let this company go under. As I worked tirelessly, I suddenly realized I was already 65. At an age when most office workers retire, I was still going strong. Of course, my successor had already been chosen from among the executives who had supported me for many years. Still, I loved my job and wanted to continue as long as my body would allow, and my successor understood that. Today was our annual New Year's party. The atmosphere of the venue had changed significantly since I was young, but it was an event we never failed to hold. The New Year's party was always held in a hotel banquet hall in a buffet style. As the appointed time arrived, the presidents of companies related to mine would show up. I was 65 now, so I had experienced my fair share of generational changes. The faces in attendance were a little different from last year, so I surveyed the room with a deep sense of nostalgia. This time, I was participating with the male employee who would become the next president. I had told him to make sure to communicate with those around him and conduct himself in a manner befitting a president. As I watched over him making the rounds with a slightly nervous expression, I also greeted the presidents of companies I had relationships with. Many of the presidents of companies who had helped me when I was young were also in attendance. They were all around my age, but they still seemed to be active and going strong. Seeing everyone as energetic as they were last year put me at ease. Being able to welcome a new year together with such lively companions was a source of vitality for me. As I was absent-mindedly looking around, I suddenly bumped into someone. I quickly turned around to find a young woman I didn't recognize standing there. Since it was our first meeting, I assumed she must be the wife of one of the company presidents. But had anyone recently informed me of their marriage? While pondering this, I immediately apologized to her. However, she didn't apologize back and instead looked me up and down as if appraising me. "Is something wrong?" I asked, feeling suspicious. The woman then spoke to me in a mocking tone. "Not really, but you're kind of in the way, you know? If you're just going to space out, shouldn't you go home, Grandma? I bet you're someone's mother, right? There are always people who tag along with their sons like this, or maybe your mama's boy of a son begged you to come with him." I couldn't hide my surprise at her unexpected words. I had never met someone so rude upon first introduction. As I stared at her wide-eyed in astonishment, the woman returned to her seat. It was the seat of President Antonio's. He had built his company into a large enterprise that maintained profitability every year. Recently, he had been actively engaging in overseas dealings, and his company had been associated with mine since its founding. However, he was also quite advanced in age. His wife was still alive, so this woman couldn't be his spouse. As I observed for a while, I noticed a young child seated next to her. The child's face looked familiar, and I involuntarily let out an "oh" sound. That must be Martin, President Antonio's 5-year-old grandson he had mentioned before. Which would make this woman likely Daisy, President Antonio's daughter. I never imagined that the timid president's daughter would grow up to have such an overbearing attitude. After returning to her seat, Daisy soon began yelling at her son Martin. Apparently, Martin had started playing with the fork in front of him. Seriously? You're going to be the president of a big company when you grow up. Why are you doing such childish things? Ah, that's dirty, stop it. Don't touch that with your bare hands. I am sorry. Martin stammered. Don't cry. You're being too loud, hand it over. Are you saying you won't listen to Mom? Enough with your sniveling. She snatched the fork out of Martin's hand as she shouted at him. It's normal to scold children when they do something wrong, but her way of scolding seemed a bit rough even from an outsider's perspective. I rushed over to them without thinking. You can't talk to him like that, I said. She glared at me out of the corner of her eye and clicked her tongue with an annoyed expression. What, you're still here? Could you not interfere with how I choose to discipline my child? Daisy was clearly hostile towards me. Even so, I firmly chided her. But your child is crying, you know. At that moment, President Antonio hurried over. After greeting me, he immediately turned to her and began scolding her with a frown. Daisy, calm down. It's only natural that Martin would cry if you get that angry. You're too soft on Martin, Dad. Kids won't understand unless you scold them a bit harshly sometimes. She said that and then snapped at President Antonio. Don't butt in. Hearing those words, he fell silent with a troubled look on his face. Then, with the same perplexed expression, I'm sorry for the commotion. He apologized to me. As I reassured him, saying, parenting is tough. I thought that he probably couldn't be too firm with his daughter due to his gentle nature. But as a father, shouldn't he properly scold her when necessary? I gazed at him with complicated feelings. In any case, Daisy can hardly be called a good mother. At this rate, her child might grow up to be warped. She may consider it none of my business, but if she's struggling with parenting, I've also raised children, so I might be able to offer some advice. However, when she saw my concerned face, she scowled in displeasure and lashed out as if taking her frustration out on me. Wait, you were the president? I totally thought you were someone's mom. I mean, your age, you know? Well, you seem about ready to retire, right? Wouldn't it be better for the next president if you hurried up and vacated the position? Daisy, watch your tongue. How could you say such a thing? But it's true, isn't it? Even people much younger than her are considering me for the next president. So what does it say about the company to have an old woman clinging to the position? Oh, don't take it the wrong way. I'm just offering some advice. I felt my face stiffen involuntarily upon hearing her words. What she said did have some truth to it, but there's a way to say things. As if shaking off my irritation. I suppose so. I ambiguously replied. Humph. Daisy looked at me with a triumphant expression and scoffed. Your company supplies to my dad's company, right? That basically makes you our subsidiary, doesn't it? If you're the president, shouldn't you think more about your employees before complaining to me? That's enough, Daisy. President Agatha is your elder. Show some respect. Don't yell at me. I'm just trying to teach her to know her place since she doesn't seem to get it. Age has nothing to do with it. She glared at him in annoyance as she spoke. President Antonio wiped the cold sweat from his brow, looking flustered. For your company to survive in the coming era, You need someone who can flexibly adapt to modern changes. If you can't take my advice, you might be in for a rude awakening someday." With those words, she spat out her warning, forcefully grabbed Martin's hand, and left the venue. Martin started wailing loudly again as his arm was suddenly yanked. Daisy dragged him along, indifferent to her child's distress. Watching her back as she walked away, I felt unsettled. Sure, I may have butted in unnecessarily, but I didn't deserve to be berated to that extent. Besides, as the president, I do my best to consider what's best for the company. The nerve of her, saying such rude things without even knowing that. President Antonio apologized to me profusely, seeing the displeased look on my face, but my mood remained gloomy the entire day. As a result, I decided to skip the after party and head straight home. A few days after that New Year's party, Daisy unexpectedly showed up at my company. When I immediately asked my secretary if I had an appointment with her today, the secretary shook her head in surprise. Apparently, she had come to our company without making a reservation. Even if it was an urgent matter, how impolite of her. As I warily wondered what business she had with us, Daisy smirked at me with a malicious expression. "Oh, so you really were the president. I'm here today as a stand-in for the president. By the way, have you decided on your retirement date? I suppose I could throw you a farewell party on behalf of the company, you know." The moment she entered the company, Daisy started spouting such disrespectful nonsense. I felt a flash of irritation but took a deep breath before asking her what she wanted. She then glared at me in displeasure, glancing around. "I have something to discuss with the next president, not you. I want to talk about the future plans. I even came all the way here, so where are they? Don't tell me you haven't chosen a successor yet? The next president is currently out. If it's about company matters, I can hear you out. Your stubborn head probably won't understand anyway. Hurry up and call them back." I refused her demand, telling her it was impossible as she shouted at me in frustration. In the first place, the next president was away on a business trip. Even if she demanded their immediate return, it would take several hours. If she had properly informed us of her visit today, this misunderstanding could have been avoided. When I pointed that out, Daisy's face turned bright red as she yelled, "I am the daughter of a major corporation's president. How dare a tiny company like yours not heed my words? Who do you think you are?" The impossible remains impossible. Please come back to the company on another day. I spoke as politely as I could, but her voice only grew louder. I don't have as much free time as you. I'm raising my only son while working as the acting president of the company. I took time out of my busy schedule to come here, and you're looking down on me because I'm young? I bet you'd have nothing to do if my company stopped placing orders, right? Shouldn't you be accommodating my plans then? Am I wrong? No matter how unreasonable or absurd her claims were, my stance on refusing her demands remained unchanged. In the first place, her yelling didn't frighten or faze me in the slightest. Perhaps sensing my unwavering attitude, Daisy caught her breath and bit down on her back teeth in frustration. Fine, I get it. Come to our company at the same time 3 days from now. I'll make you regret going against me. She rattled off those words in rapid succession and then dashed out of the president's office. She slammed the door shut behind her, as if venting her frustration, causing a loud bang to reverberate through the room. My secretary, perhaps overwhelmed by her demeanor, trembled with tears in her eyes. She was still young, so it was understandable that Daisy scared her. As I calmed my secretary down, I pondered what she could be plotting. As a president, I had faced many problems, But this was my first time dealing with someone so unreasonable and lacking in common sense. I might need to prepare myself to counter her, no matter what she threw at me. With those thoughts secretly in mind, I began to contemplate how to handle her next move. 3 days later, I headed to the president's office as Daisy had instructed. I had assumed President Antonio would be there as well, but when I entered the room with a bow, only Daisy was present. Sitting in the president's chair, she glared at me intently. Despite having done nothing wrong, it seemed I had completely earned her dislike. The discussion was unlikely to be a pleasant one. Thinking it unfortunate, I offered a gift as a conversation starter, but she accepted it only to thrust it at the secretary standing beside her, showing no interest. Before beginning the discussion, I asked where President Antonio was. At that, she grinned as if she had been waiting for the question. According to her, he had gone out to resolve some trouble and had left the role of president to her for the time being. By the way, my mother knows nothing about running a company, so that's why I'm serving as the acting president. You probably didn't know, but I'm incredibly capable. Managing a company is a piece of cake for me, Daisy boasted, puffing out her chest with a smirk. From there, her self-praise began. Apparently, after studying economics in college and teaching herself business management, Daisy had been working at her father's company as the next president. It was thanks to her achievements that her father's company was able to establish overseas dealings. She had even decided to pass the company on to her son when she stepped down as president. Her husband had run off, refusing to acknowledge their child as soon as their son was born, but Daisy had overcome that adversity, raising her son properly and building her current position. Everything I do is right. You complained about my parenting methods the other day, but that's none of your business. You've got some nerve. With those words, she concluded her personal story. I responded with a vague acknowledgement and tried to subtly appease her. To my surprise, she was incredibly easy to win over and beamed at me, saying, "I'm glad you understand." She seemed to take great pride in her accomplishments. I continued to subtly praise her as we carried on our conversation. At this rate, I thought she might be easy to handle. However, she turned out to be a more difficult person than I had anticipated. "So, what was the matter you wanted to discuss?" I prompted, and Daisy finally got to the point. Daisy mentioned that she had some concerns about the products my company was supplying. I wondered if there were any areas for improvement, but she silently handed me the documents she had in front of her. The papers detailed the compensation my company was receiving. I couldn't quite grasp her intentions, but I accepted the documents and skimmed through them. However, I couldn't find anything amiss. As I tilted my head, wondering what this was all about, she smirked. "We've started making our own cheap products, so goodbye." For a moment, I couldn't comprehend her words. Even so, I'm sure my eyes were wide with shock. Seeing my reaction, she laughed heartily, clearly enjoying herself. "This is what happens when you go against me. I was so pissed off that I had your company investigated, and what you're doing is nothing short of betrayal." "What on earth do you mean? Are you still going to play dumb?" "Fine, I'll spell it out for you. No matter how you look at it, your company's products are ridiculously overpriced, aren't they? You might have fooled my dad, but don't think you can fool me the same way." She mocked me with a triumphant look. I tried to argue back, questioning what made our products overpriced, but she firmly stated that her company could now produce them more cheaply and would be terminating our contract immediately. Her words left me flustered, and I racked my brain for a way to persuade her. This company was one of our biggest clients. If our contract with them was cancelled, our company would be in jeopardy. The employees who had believed in me and followed me might lose their jobs. I couldn't let that happen. With that strong conviction, I passionately explained how our products differed from those of other companies and what aspects President Antonio had appreciated, leading to our long-standing contract. However, Daisy refused to listen to reason. Your company is outdated. Cost reduction is essential in the coming era. With people talking about high prices these days, this is for the benefit of consumers too. If you can't even understand that and keep up with the current situation, I think you should seriously consider stepping down as president for the sake of your company and employees. Daisy spoke in an exasperated tone, so I asked if President Antonio also agreed with the contract termination. She brushed it off as if it were irrelevant. I'm the acting president now. I've been given full authority over this company. I'm sure my dad would support my decision. Then, she waved her hand dismissively as if there was nothing more to discuss. Her exceedingly rude attitude almost made me lose my composure and lash out in anger right then and there. I'll bring the contract termination documents to your company tomorrow, so don't try to run away. Her words were laced with venom. I was about to resign myself to accepting the situation when a clever idea suddenly occurred to me.
I understand. We won't deliver to you ever again,
I said in a strained voice. She became cheerful and showed a smile. Her laughter would be short-lived. I returned to my company and began preparing to confront her when she brought the documents tomorrow. She had been so insolent that she couldn't complain if she experienced a bit of pain. With that thought, I quietly waited for tomorrow to come. The next day, 5 minutes before my scheduled meeting with Daisy, I was wrapping up some paperwork when there was a knock on the door of the president's office, and my secretary's voice rang out. "Come in," I called out, and my secretary opened the door with her usual polite demeanor. Ushered in by the secretary were a triumphant-looking Daisy and a pale-faced President Antonio. I immediately thought that what I had set in motion yesterday was already taking effect and inwardly smirked. "Thank you for coming," I said, offering words of appreciation before inviting the two to sit on the sofa. Daisy sat down on the sofa with a confident stride and slid the contract termination documents across to me. Beside her, President Antonio was sweating profusely, still seemingly unable to grasp the situation. Are you really going through with the contract termination?" he asked in a feeble voice. To him, I simply replied, "Of course," and picked up a pen. "This is truly unfortunate. We are also shocked that it has come to this. Thank you for your patronage until now." Before signing, I looked straight at President Antonio and spoke in a calm tone. At that, his face turned even paler. "Just sign it already," Daisy urged me, so I obediently signed the documents. Witnessing this, his face turned ashen, his eyes wide with disbelief. He must have been shocked that I signed so readily. Before I could finish signing, "Wait a moment!" President Antonio cried out. With that momentum, he leaned forward, pressed his head against the desk, and apologized in a strained voice. "Please give us another chance. My daughter's rudeness towards you is my responsibility. Please, won't you reconsider?" After shouting those words, President Antonio apologized over and over, pleading with me. Surprised by her father's sudden behavior, Daisy's eyes darted around in confusion. "Wait, stop! What's going on? You apologize too. At this rate, our company will. What is this about? What did you do?" She questioned me in a panic. I calmly explained to her. "When I told them that our company would be terminating our contract with yours, the presidents of the companies under our umbrella all said they would cut ties with your company as well. I merely informed President Antonio of that." At my words, her eyes grew wide. Beside her, President Antonio held his head in his hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I observed the two of them with a cold gaze. How did this happen? It's your fault. You went and unilaterally terminated the contract. Agatha is my benefactor. The reason I was able to grow this company so much is because she supported me. And you destroyed that in a single day. He finally couldn't take it anymore and glared at her with bloodshot eyes. She was stunned by his words. She finally seemed to understand the gravity of what she had done. How can this old hag's measly company have so much influence? Watch your mouth. Agatha took over and protected this company after her husband passed. Even though the scale of her company is smaller than ours, it has persisted thanks to her efforts and the high regard people have for her. This outcome is only natural. I was the one who was wrong. If I hadn't trusted you just because you're my daughter, this wouldn't have. He clung to me in desperation. He begged me to somehow forgive them for this incident. Seeing him in such a state nearly moved me to pity, but I steeled myself and maintained a stern expression. All of this was to ensure that our company would never again face such a threat. Amid all this, Daisy's cell phone rang loudly. She said it was a work call, so I urged her to answer it. After hesitantly picking up the phone, Daisy's face immediately turned pale, and her mouth fell open. What? What did you say? Daisy arched her back in surprise. Seeing her reaction, President Antonio asked what was wrong. The cost-reduced products I made to replace the ones from here have arrived, and they're all defective. How can this be? Those simple parts should be easy to replicate with our technology. Watching her flustered state, I chuckled softly. Apparently displeased by my laughter, Daisy turned to me with a bright red face, glaring accusingly. That's impossible. Those products utilize unique techniques that our craftsmen have honed over generations. Even if you manage to create similar imitations, they won't be usable. Huh? Our company and yours have different histories, you see. I said that with a boastful attitude, seizing the opportunity. This is what happens when they underestimate my company's craftsmen. Also, our manufacturing methods are trade secrets, so we haven't taught them to your company's craftsmen. Even if you knew how to make them, we have patents, so you can't copy and produce them. If you made them in secret, our employees would notice right away. Well, I suppose it doesn't matter to your company now that the contract is being terminated. Upon hearing my words, Daisy was left speechless. For a few seconds, silence filled the president's office. Both of them had lost their will to fight, their faces ashen. Seeing their reactions as I had expected, I was mostly satisfied, but I decided to execute phase 2 of my plan. Do you want to pretend the contract termination never happened? At my words, President Antonio's head shot up. Seeing him nod vigorously, even as tears streamed down his face, I made a certain proposal. However, there is one condition. From now on, you must never let Daisy be involved in management. I can't trust her. In fact, from the moment I heard she was the next president, I had no intention of continuing business with your company. The future of a company led by someone like her is set in stone. What will you do, President Antonio? Without hesitation. I understand, he replied. Hearing his answer, Daisy angrily confronted him. Why? I've been studying to take over the company. You know how talented I am, don't you, Dad? Who else is going to succeed you if not me? In the first place, you're the one who decided you were the next president on your own, right? I never intended to entrust the management to you. There's a woman among our company's executives who is more capable than you. I wanted to leave the company to her. But then you said you wanted to be the next president, so I Don't tell me, that impudent woman? I absolutely won't accept that. It seemed she had forcibly claimed the position of the next president. I hadn't met the woman they mentioned yet, but she, biting her lip in frustration, spun around to face me. Don't tell me you did this because that impudent woman told you to. She cast unwarranted suspicion on me, but I shook my head. I don't know who that woman is. But President Antonio, if she's truly competent, I believe choosing her is the right path as a president. Through this incident, have you learned the consequences of being lenient just because she's your daughter? As I said that, he replied, I understand. While tears streamed down his face. What happened this time is unforgivable. Daisy, take responsibility and resign. If you want to succeed the company, you need more experience. I'll never let you work at my company again. Get out of our house too. That treatment is too harsh. I'm your biological daughter. And I can't believe you're entrusting the company to someone who's not even family. Martin is already studying to take over the company in the future, you know. We need to talk about Martin as well. I never reprimanded your attitude towards him because I believed you were growing into an adult. But I always had this nagging feeling that your education wasn't benefiting Martin. What are you saying? I'm his mother. You're going to take a child away from his mother? That's just cruel. Daisy glared at him as she said that, but he maintained a serious expression and intimidated her with a low voice, saying they needed to have a family discussion. Hearing his tone, she swallowed her words and hung her head. I believe we're done here. Let's forget about the contract termination. I look forward to working with you in the future. I'll personally speak to the presidents of the other companies as well. As I said that, his complexion improved somewhat. Daisy looked frustrated but seemed to have no intention of saying anything more. He dragged her out of the room as she kept her head down. After that, Daisy resigned from her position as the next president. The woman they had mentioned took over as the next president. She came to greet me once, and unlike Daisy, she was a graceful and intelligent woman. Apparently, she was really kicked out of the house and told not to return until she could support herself. After a thorough discussion about Martin, he chose President Antonio over Daisy. Daisy reportedly cried about being an unlucky parent, but it seems he had been constantly oppressed by her and found it painful. President Antonio empathized with Martin's feelings and decided to raise him. Even though her child was taken away, Daisy threatened, I'll sue you. But with Martin's testimony, her lawsuit apparently didn't hold up. In the end, she was forced to leave the house and live on her own. The presidents under my company resumed their dealings with President Antonio. However, due to this incident, his standing took a significant hit. He was shocked to see his company's performance, which had been steadily rising, now stagnating. Furthermore, various plans Daisy had carried out at the company without permission came to light, resulting in billions in losses. It's unclear whether President Antonio's company can recover, but since he bears some responsibility, I hope he reflects deeply on this. My company avoided the contract termination and maintained its performance. In fact, as President Antonio desperately tried to regain his company's performance, we received a flood of orders from him, increasing our revenue even more than before. Moreover, an overseas company that had taken notice of my company directly proposed a business deal. By accepting that deal, my company successfully expanded overseas. Faced with rewarding work, our employees united and even succeeded in developing new technologies. Seeing my employees working with bright expressions, I wholeheartedly feel that it was truly worthwhile to diligently protect this company. Water's good enough for poor folks. Alana, my daughter's future mother-in-law, said, laughing coarsely. I couldn't hide my discomfort at her vulgarity.
Oh, could it be?
Right after that, my daughter's sister-in-law-to-be, Raina, looked at me, her face turning pale. I just smiled slightly. I'm Sonia Rollins, turning 54 this year. I divorced my ex-husband when our daughter, Krista, was 3. The reason for our divorce was irreconcilable differences. He wouldn't work and spent his days drinking. No matter what I said, he never changed. Naturally, our financial situation worsened. I didn't need a family like that, so I decided to divorce him. We divorced without any child support or alimony. Since then, it's been just Krista and me. I was a housewife until the divorce. When I had to raise Krista alone, I started working desperately. I couldn't leave young Krista alone at home, so I initially took on work-from-home jobs to make ends meet. Of course, life was tough. Working from morning till night, the pay was low, leading to constant saving. There were times, a day before payday, when I ran out of money and went without food. Despite the hardships, I managed to raise Krista into adulthood. With Krista becoming a working adult, I found myself with more free time and started dedicating more time to work. Leveraging my experience in simple tasks, I began creating handmade items. This eventually turned into a successful business. There's also been a change in my personal life. Krista got engaged. Not long after Krista started working at her company, she began dating a man named Nicholas. Nicholas is Krista's boss at work and is 5 years her senior. I've seen a photo of Nicholas that Krista showed me. He seemed like a fine young man. It appears Krista has learned from her father's bad example, as Nicholas gives off a serious impression. I'm delighted with the happiness Krista has found. Now, in the latter half of my life, I've decided to live as I please. That was my thought. Then, one day, Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Krista approached me after dinner. It was unusual for Krista to come to me hesitantly like this. While thinking this, I responded to Krista. What's the rush? You seem off. What's going on? Then Krista said to me, modestly, I'm going to marry Nicholas. Really? That's wonderful. Congratulations. Since I haven't actually met Nicholas, I don't know what kind of person he is. I hoped he would be just like the person in the photo. I'm glad you feel that way, Mom. I was worried you might oppose it. Krista seemed relieved that I didn't oppose her decision. Her face clearly showed relief. Then Krista made a suggestion. So, I was hoping you could meet Nicholas this weekend. It seems Krista wanted me to meet Nicholas before they got married. Considering how serious Krista is, she probably wanted to show me Nicholas's face to put me at ease. I nodded strongly towards Krista. All right. I'll meet Nicholas. I want to see what kind of person he is. Mom, Krista said, looking happy. And so, it was decided that Nicholas and I would meet. Sunday of the following weekend. I was waiting at home for Krista and him. It was just before 11 a.m. It wouldn't be long until Krista brought Nicholas over. Then, at that moment, the doorbell rang. Yes. When I opened the door, there stood Krista and Nicholas. Nice to meet you. I'm Nicholas Friedman, engaged to Krista. Nicholas said, greeting me. I felt a bit relieved by Nicholas's politeness. Krista is my precious only daughter. I'm glad her partner is a decent person. Please come in, I said, inviting Krista and Nicholas into the house. Nicholas still seemed like a fine young man after entering our home. He brought famous brand sweets as a gift. And he shared the story of how he and Krista met with a smile. "Nicholas, stop it. You're embarrassing me," Krista said, blushing, addressing Nicholas. Seeing Krista like this felt fresh to me. However, the warm atmosphere changed in the next moment. "By the way, is your father at work today?" Nicholas asked, looking around curiously. His expression was somewhat puzzled. I was taken aback by Nicholas's question. Glancing at Krista, she looked a bit pale. She probably hadn't told Nicholas about being raised by a single mother. Honestly, it was wrong of Krista to keep it a secret. In traditional households, single mothers often face prejudice. I braced myself to explain the situation to Nicholas. "Krista might not have mentioned it, but I'm divorced and a single mother." Nicholas's face, previously smiling, went blank for a moment.
What's wrong?
I asked Nicholas, feeling anxious. Maybe it wasn't good for me to have told him. That's what I thought. But in the next moment, Nicholas was already smiling. "It's nothing, please don't worry," he said, still smiling.
Is that so?
I said, tilting my head, puzzled. Despite being confused by Nicholas's change of expression, I didn't press further. After that, the marriage talks proceeded smoothly. Krista seemed to enjoy planning the wedding, asking, "What kind of dress should I choose? What color do you think is good for me, Mom?" With excitement. "Well, maybe a color you like?" I responded, but couldn't quite feel at ease. I couldn't forget Nicholas's expression from that moment. Nicholas's expression went blank. Perhaps his family has strict views on single parenthood. So, I asked Krista, "What did Nicholas say on the way back that day? About us being a single mother household? Maybe Nicholas is facing opposition to marrying Krista from his parents." I asked, but Krista answered with a puzzled look. "He didn't say anything special?" "Mom, aren't you worrying too much?" Since Krista said that, I couldn't ask any more. However, my bad feeling proved right. It happened one night. "Mom." As soon as Krista returned, she called out my name. Her expression was quite dark, and I asked her in surprise, "Krista, why such a gloomy face? Did something happen?" Even though I asked, Krista remained silent. It was unusual for the optimistic Krista to look so troubled. After a while, Krista hesitantly began to speak. "Actually, it seems Nicholas's family isn't too pleased about our marriage," Krista said, looking sad. "Why?" "Because we're a single mother family. They think Nicholas will struggle because we're poor and from a single parent home." That's an awful thing to say. It would be very hard to hear such things from the in-laws. I asked Krista seriously, "Did Nicholas's mother say that?" Krista nodded silently. I was outraged by the turn of events. Just because we're a single mother family doesn't mean they should assume we're poor. We've had our struggles, but now we live a normal life. I work as hard as any man. And then Krista told me something unbelievable. Nicholas's sister also said some things.
Like what?
I asked Krista. She said we're just after Nicholas's money. That it's impossible for them to accept us as family. Krista answered, looking disheartened. Her face looked incredibly lonely. Krista must have been deeply hurt by these direct comments. It's terrible that they would say such things about me without even meeting me. I can't believe Nicholas's parents. What did Nicholas say at that time? I asked Krista. And I remembered Nicholas's expression when he came to our house the other day. Maybe his expressionless face was because he imagined his family's reaction. It seems his family has quite a prejudice against single mothers. I started to worry about the future. Then Krista said, Nicholas defended me. After all, I work at the same company as Nicholas, so there's no way I'd ask for money. I felt relieved. If Nicholas is on your side, that's reassuring. I found myself saying that without thinking. If Nicholas had sided with his family instead of defending Krista, I would have been worried about her future. She would probably continue to face unpleasant remarks from his family. But if Nicholas is on her side, it felt somewhat better. A few days later, Krista suggested having a family meeting with Nicholas's family before the wedding.
Mom, I want to have a family meeting with Nicholas's family before the wedding. I'm really sorry.
According to Krista, it was Alana's suggestion.
You should greet your fiancé's parents at least once. Your mother has that much common sense, right?
She was told.
Nicholas and I couldn't exactly refuse. I'm really sorry,
Krista said, apologizing and being considerate of me. For Krista's marriage introduction, we are meeting with his family. Honestly, I have no idea what they might say. I don't really want to go, but it seems right to follow through with the courtesy.
It's okay,
I responded with my agreement. Then, the day of the marriage introduction arrived. Krista and I went to a restaurant near his parents' house. The reason for a restaurant, as Krista told me, was because Alana had said, "We can't have you in our house when you're not married yet. There's a fine dining restaurant nearby, that will do, won't it?" The restaurant Alana chose charges $300 per person for a course meal. I go there occasionally for business, but hardly ever privately. I was puzzled by Alana's choice of restaurant. It seems Alana had also chosen a cafe near their house for Krista's first greeting to the family. Moreover, Krista ended up paying for Alana's meal as well. According to Alana, "It's only natural since you're becoming my son's wife." Apparently, Nicholas reimbursed the meal cost later. Why does Alana act so arrogantly, even though she's the one inviting us for the marriage greeting? I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. But if I, as Krista's mother, refuse now, Krista will surely be criticized for being rude. After getting married, Krista might end up feeling uncomfortable. So, reluctantly, I accepted the proposal. Then, I put on light makeup and headed to the designated place. I usually wear full makeup for work, but I thought it best to keep it understated today. My outfit was also much more modest than usual. A flashy outfit might give them the impression that I'm extravagant. Given that we're already being accused of being after Nicholas's money, a modest outfit seemed wise. With these thoughts, Krista and I entered the upscale restaurant and were led by the staff to a private room. Upon opening the door, Nicholas and his family were there. "Krista, Sonia, thank you for coming today." Nicholas greeted us politely. "Thank you as well for today." I also expressed my gratitude to Nicholas. Then I faced father-in-law Kevin, mother-in-law Lana, and sister-in-law Raina. His parents and Raina smirked unpleasantly and looked down on Krista and me. It was clear at a glance that we were not welcomed by his family. I greeted them with heightened wariness. "Thank you for giving us your precious time today. I'm Sonia, Krista's mother. It's a pleasure to meet you." Then Alana said with a nasty smile, "I'd rather not have any further association, you know." "Mom!" Nicholas admonished Alana, but she didn't seem to care. "Just being from a single-parent family is problematic enough. You must be struggling with money. Even your clothes are so plain." Alana scrutinized my outfit from top to bottom and said. Then she laughed mockingly. My attempt to dress modestly had backfired. Raina also hurled insults while laughing. "You could have married someone decent." Poor Nicholas, stuck with a poor mother and daughter. I was irritated by Raina's comment. Such remarks were too rude for a first meeting. But I couldn't disrupt Krista's marriage.
Excuse me.
I reluctantly took my seat. Perhaps because I didn't retort. The in-laws looked at me as if they found me amusing. Krista looked at me with concern. Nicholas seemed a bit angry at his family's lack of manners. His brows were furrowed. Unaware of his demeanor, Alana was in high spirits. Today, we've reserved a course meal. It's $300. Alana excitedly told Reina. Really? I'm looking forward to it because the courses here are so expensive. We have to eat a lot. Reina was giddy with excitement. Kevin nodded happily as well. After a while, the staff brought the dishes. It was a colorful array of amuse-bouche. At this restaurant, 3 types of amuse-bouche are served on one plate. They all looked very delicious. But in front of me, there was only water. I was about to call the staff back, but they had already left the room. Only the water was left in front of me, a stark reminder. Nicholas looked at the scene, dumbfounded. Reina, knowing what was happening, laughed mockingly. Krista noticed it too and said with concern, "Mom." Then, in the next moment, Alana laughed nastily. "Poor people are fine with just water," Alana said, laughing crudely. I showed my discomfort at her vulgarity. "What does this mean?" I asked Alana. The in-laws had called us to this restaurant. Yet, they had no intention of hosting us properly. I was quite irritated inside. Alana glanced at me, then laughed as if she was pleased. Even though I was angry, she didn't seem to care. She seemed to enjoy it, actually. "Oh? Not only are you a poor single mother, but are you also stupid? Did you really think someone worthless like you would be welcomed?" Alana hurled insults at me. Kevin nodded as if it was to be expected. "Don't you feel ashamed to be a single parent? A woman who was left by her husband, you're full of flaws. A plain woman like you becomes unnecessary, right?" Kevin said, laughing crudely. It wasn't that my ex-husband left me, but Kevin's assumption was unilateral. I truly thought this was unbelievable as a human being. Reina also laughed joyfully. "I don't want to end up like Krista's mother. Working for low wages even though she's a woman. It's really pitiful without any feminine charm." While saying this, she looked down on me. "Mom, I'm sorry." Krista looked like she was about to cry. She must feel responsible for putting me in this difficult situation. Krista was looking down. I had reached my limit of patience. Being looked down upon like this, I couldn't stay quiet any longer. It might be time to fight back. At that moment, "Enough already! All of you ganging up on Krista's mother. Aren't you ashamed as adults?" Nicholas yelled loudly. I was surprised that Nicholas stood up for me.
Nicholas.
Krista also looked surprised. Nicholas was red-faced and angry at his family. However, Alana and the others showed no remorse. Alana, still laughing joyfully, said, "There's no need to defend poor people. Why is Nicholas getting so angry?" Kevin nodded significantly. Nicholas's words seemed to have no effect on them. I could only be dumbfounded by his parents. They must lack common sense. It might be time for a counterattack. I had a last resort that would surprise the in-laws. At that moment, Reina started to look at my face. I ended up glaring at Reina. Then Reina muttered,
"Oh, could it be?"
Right after that, Reina looked at me and her face turned pale. It seems she finally realized who I really am. I let out a slight smile. Reina, looking at me, was trembling.
"No way."
Noticing her reaction, Kevin asked Reina with a puzzled look,
What's wrong with you? You've been acting strange for a while.
Alana also looked at Reina, surprised.
You're as pale as a ghost. Are you feeling okay?
Alana spoke to Reina with concern. Still, Reina's trembling didn't stop. Given the truth, Reina realized it's understandable. Then Reina asked Kevin.
Dad, your company is Globe Crafts, right?
Reina looked at Kevin, seeking confirmation. Globe Crafts is a small to medium-sized enterprise with about 100 employees. The salaries aren't comparable to those of major companies. And I am familiar with Globe Crafts. The reason I know it is because it's related to my work. Kevin said with a laugh.
What's this all of a sudden? I might look like this, but I'm working hard as the sales manager.
And Kevin continued.
I used my connections to hire you as a part-time worker in our company, didn't I? Be grateful.
Kevin said, laughing.
That's right.
Reina's face fell, looking resigned. Kevin asked Reina, puzzled.
But why are you asking this? Are you trying to show off because this poor person is likely employed on a non-regular basis, and you work as a regular employee?
Kevin looked down on me with a disdainful gaze. This man is about to face a dire situation. I vowed in my heart. Then Reina sighed lightly and began to speak.
Dad, don't you know the company's clients?
The company's clients? Kevin asked, puzzled. Alana looked stunned. Being a housewife, she didn't seem to understand much. Reina hesitantly explained.
I've met Krista's mother before. Inside the company. She was wearing more makeup then, and I didn't recognize her right away.
Kevin seemed confused.
What do you mean inside the company? I'm sure I remember the faces of the employees, including part-timers, but there's no older woman like that?
I frowned at being called an older woman. But it seems Kevin was too preoccupied to notice. Trying desperately to remember as he heard inside the company. However, I haven't spoken directly to Kevin, so it's understandable if he doesn't remember. As I thought this, Reina began to apologize.
Krista's mother! I'm really sorry for what happened.
Seeing Reina's behavior, the in-laws began to get agitated.
Why apologize? There's no need to say sorry to such a poor person.
Alana said.
That's right. Don't you have any pride? Apologizing to a poor person like this.
Kevin shouted at Reina. Reina glared sharply at her parents.
Dad, Mom. Krista's mother is actually very wealthy. Much more than Dad could ever be.
What did you say? Kevin glared at Reina. Being told such a thing by his own daughter must have been unexpected. Alana, too, reacted to Reina's statement with,
How could you say that?
Screaming almost hysterically. Reina said with a resigned attitude.
Because Krista's mother is the president. I've served her tea in the company's reception room. You know Roland's Bags, right?
Kevin froze upon hearing that name. Then he turned his neck to look at me. I deliberately smiled. Kevin's face turned pale.
Roland's Bags. Isn't that the brand the president finally convinced for a collaboration that's supposed to happen?
Then Alana screamed.
Roland's Bags, that's the one with bags in department stores, right? Even my bag is from there.
Alana said, looking over her bag multiple times. When we entered this restaurant's private room, I noticed a familiar bag. Alana was holding it carefully under her chair. It's a breach of manners in a high-end restaurant, but it must be her favorite bag. I told Alana with a smile. That's a magazine giveaway, isn't it? I'm honored that you're using my brand. Alana's face turned red. Then she looked down, embarrassed. She must feel ashamed that her bag was recognized as a magazine giveaway. I took out my business card from my card holder. I am Sonia Rollins, the representative of Rollins Bags. The in-laws scrutinized the business card carefully.
To think you were actually the president!
Kevin was trembling as he looked at the business card. Alana looked incredulous. I watched the two staring silently at the business card and said, "We were supposed to collaborate with Globe Crafts, but it seems like that collaboration won't be possible anymore. Such a shame." Hearing this, Kevin looked disturbed.
Why? That collaboration is the most important project the president has been working on. If we cancel it, our company will,
Kevin said, trembling with fear.
What's going on?
Alana asked Kevin, confused. The truth is, Globe Crafts is in a precarious financial situation. Compared to the past, fewer people are making handmade items. When I was young, my mother used to sew everything by hand. But now, cheap ready-made products are abundant, probably a sign of the times. Globe Crafts has been hit hard by this trend, with sales declining year by year. When Globe Crafts' president proposed the collaboration, he mentioned it was a strategy to turn around the company's dire situation. However, I have collaborated with many famous brands. So, honestly, I wasn't very interested in collaborating with a small to medium-sized enterprise like Globe Crafts. Initially, I declined the president's proposal, but eventually, I was persuaded by his enthusiasm and agreed. We decided to collaborate with Globe Crafts to make bags. But now, that's a thing of the past. Kevin was trembling. He must be terrified of what's to come. Ignoring Kevin, I quietly said, "The collaboration with Globe Crafts didn't seem to offer much benefit. I was just moved by the president's enthusiasm. But a company that looks down on Krista." I stared at Kevin with a cold gaze. Kevin was sweating under my stare. Then, in the next moment, he apologized to me. What? While Alana was confused by Kevin's apology, he desperately sought my forgiveness. Krista and Nicholas were also surprised by Kevin's apology.
I'm truly sorry.
Kevin is apologizing, clearly not caring about how it looks. To me, Kevin's apology doesn't resonate at all. After all, an apology that comes only after he realizes my position is just to protect himself. There's no genuine remorse there. I spoke with a chillingly cold voice. An apology now? After you've looked down on Krista and me all this time. To think that an apology would suffice after all this. Kevin's mindset must be overly optimistic. Then, realizing that his apology wouldn't turn the situation around, Kevin quickly stood up. It was merely a performance after all. Alana, looking bewildered at me, said, "We're going to be family, so you'll forgive us, right?" She said that flippantly, looking at me. Then Alana continued, "I'm a big fan of Rollins Bags. Since we're family, I'll get some products for free, right?" Alana looked at me with hopeful eyes. I was so appalled that I couldn't say anything. "Mom, that's too convenient," Nicholas said, frowning and sternly admonishing her. Even for Alana, that comment was too far beyond the pale. But Alana, seemingly not understanding, said,
"Why not? There must be plenty of stock, right? It wouldn't hurt to give away a few."
Getting into a worse mood, Kevin and Raina looked at Alana with dismay. I told Alana, "Our products are not free to give away. After all, you are strangers to us." Alana looked frustrated at my words. "Krista and our Nicholas are getting married, right? So we are family. A family should provide financial support."
You're the president after all.
Alana said this with a straight face. After all the disdainful poor-calling, this was her attitude. She clearly had no remorse. Nicholas finally lost his patience with Alana's attitude.
Mom, you change your attitude just because you found out Krista's mom is the president? Aren't you ashamed?
Nicholas, his face red, reproached Alana. But Alana, unfazed, laughed it off.
It doesn't matter. A president must have more money than they know what to do with, right? Share a little with us.
I quietly told Alana.
Even if Krista and Nicholas get married, I have no intention of forming any ties with you.
Alana, surprised, tried to cozy up to me.
Don't say that. Once Nicholas gets married, we'll be family anyway, so giving away a bag or two.
Alana was infuriating. As I was about to retort, Nicholas stepped between Alana and me.
Nicholas.
When I asked, Nicholas looked troubled.
I knew Sonia was the president. And I kept silent, knowing my parents would bother Sonia if they found out.
Kevin looked regretful at Nicholas's confession.
You knew? If you had told me, I would have. If you had known, you'd act just like Mom, right?
Nicholas looked at Kevin with a cold gaze.
How dare you speak to your parents like that? Keep this up, and you're disowned.
Kevin shouted at Nicholas. Krista was puzzled by their exchange. Nicholas sighed and declared,
I'm fine with being disowned. I'll sever ties with you all. Why would you say such a thing? After all we've done to raise you.
Alana, shaken, spoke to Nicholas. Kevin and Raina, stunned, stared at Nicholas. They hadn't expected him to say he'd cut ties.
I want to cherish Krista going forward. I don't need a family that disregards Krista and Sonia.
Nicholas! Alana collapsed in tears. Kevin and Raina stood there, dumbfounded. Being disowned by their beloved son must be incredibly hard. But that's solely the responsibility of Alana and the rest of the in-laws.
Live with your regrets. I'm sure you'll struggle in the future,
I said, smiling lightly. Then Krista joined in with my statement.
We won't even tell you if we have children.
She said this directly to her in-laws.
Not being able to see the grandchild. Please, spare us that.
Alana cried out in agony. Amidst this, Nicholas murmured,
We're done being a family.
At his words, Kevin and Raina tried to cling to us with faces about to cry. Ignoring such in-laws, Krista, Nicholas, and I left the restaurant. Afterward, I heard Kevin and Raina were fired from the company. The day after the incident at the restaurant, I told the president of Globecrafts that I wanted to cancel the collaboration. The president tried to persuade me several times, but I refused.
I cannot collaborate with a company that harbors individuals capable of such disdain.
While I sympathized with the president's desire to save his company, I couldn't support a company that employed Kevin and his ilk. I explained the situation to the president. Then the president became furious. Apparently, the president has a daughter about Krista's age and couldn't forgive Kevin and Raina's actions. The collaboration with me was crucial for Globecrafts. Kevin and Raina had ruined such an important collaboration. It's understandable that the president couldn't forgive them. Kevin was already of age, and Raina was employed part-time through Kevin's connections. After being fired from Globecrafts, finding a new job would be very tough for them. And Alana was a housewife. She had already been cut off by Nicholas, their only breadwinner. Once, the in-laws came directly to our company to negotiate.
Please collaborate with Globecrafts. If you do, the president will rehire me. Even if not a collaboration, provide financial support. Our family is suffering, you know? Families help each other out.
They both pleaded desperately. After treating people like poor people and now suddenly claiming family, it's laughable. I made it clear. Neither collaboration nor financial support is possible. Nicholas has also severed ties with you, hasn't he? Please leave now. But the in-laws wouldn't leave.
But
Trying somehow to cling to me. I firmly told the in-laws again.
never appear in front of me again. If I see you again, I'll call the police.
Perhaps because I mentioned the police, Kevin said.
Please, not the police. We won't come again.
And left with Alana. The in-laws' clothes were dirty. They probably weren't living well. They who had once scorned others as poor. It's purely their own fault. Apparently, Raina has since lived almost entirely shut in. Struggling to find a job and unlikely to marry. Despairing about the future, Raina barely leaves her room. Her future seems to hold nothing but despair. 3 years have passed since then. Now, Krista, Nicholas, and I live together. Ideally, as newlyweds, Krista and Nicholas should live alone. But Nicholas said, I think it's safer for Krista if she's with you in case of anything. And they decided to live with me. Nicholas, busy with work, often helps with household chores alongside Krista. I'm truly grateful. And a significant change has occurred for the three of us. One day, Krista approached me with a serious look. Mom. Worried something might have happened to Krista, I became anxious. Then, in the next moment, she smiled.
It looks like I'm going to be a mom.
Krista joyfully stroked her belly.
That's wonderful, Krista. Congratulations.
Delighted, I hugged Krista. Nicholas smiled happily beside Krista and me. I'm sure various things will happen from now on. But if it's us, we can surely overcome them. I'm also looking forward to meeting the new grandchild. Imagining our happy future, a natural smile spread across my face. I'll never forget the shock of running into my husband Kent at our best friend Sarah's baby shower. It seemed Sarah didn't know that Kent and I were married. Anyway, the idea the two of them had a child together. That was beyond belief.
You two look so happy together, I'm almost jealous. Oh dear, to be the odd one out in our trio of friends. Sarah, Kent, I hope you guys find happiness, no matter what.
Sarah nodded with a full-faced smile, while Kent did awkwardly in return. I knew the truth. I knew Kent was the kind of man who'd say, pregnancy is not an illness, so don't be lazy. He wouldn't lift a finger to help a pregnant woman. To think he'd cheat on his wife, with our close friend no less, was beyond comprehension. Asking for forgiveness? That was out of the question. I decided it was time for him to lose everything. My name is Lucy. I'm a hairdresser in a small town. This is where I was born and raised. It's not as flashy as the city, but it's a comfortable place to live. The sense of community here is just right, making it a great place to call home. Kent and I were high school classmates. Back then, our friends Sarah and us were known as the inseparable trio, always together. Especially Kent and I were the class's official couple. Whenever someone asked, "Where's Kent right now?" I could answer precisely, often teased, "You're going to make a great wife someday." The third member of our trio, Sarah, was always plugged into her earphones, listening to British music or the radio, dreaming of England. She was one of the top students in our class. Sarah achieved her dream, attending university in England, and after graduating, we only exchanged messages a few times a year. After graduation, I went to vocational school and became a hairdresser. Since my family owned a beauty salon, I started working there. As for Kent, he joined his family's business after attending a local university. That company sold beauty products like shampoo. Interestingly, the company was a business partner of my family's salon. The connection was another reason our relationship was often the subject of playful comments. Kent was reserved, not much of a talker, the opposite of talkative me. Yet strangely, we got along well, and our relationship from high school led to a marriage without a formal proposal. We bought a house in the city, started a new life in a spacious home. Sometime after our marriage, I became pregnant. Overjoyed to be carrying Kent's child, I happily shared the news that night.
Kent, guess what? I'm pregnant.
I was eagerly waiting for his joyous reaction, but what I got was anything but enthusiastic. "Oh, is that so? Aren't you happy?" Silently, he started fiddling with his mobile phone, searching for due dates and birth stories.
"The baby will be here next year. Make sure you wrap up your work by then."
"Is that all you have to say?"
"What else is there to say?"
"I guess nothing." I was honestly disappointed with his attitude, but soon, I found myself in a situation that left no room for such concerns. My first pregnancy was tougher than I had imagined. I used to work full-time, but sudden bouts of illness and doctor's appointments often made it difficult. Reluctantly, I decided to take maternity leave earlier than usual and focus on my health. However, Kent was unsympathetic to my condition. He searched the standard duration of maternity leave on his mobile phone and confronted me with it.
"Aren't you taking off too early? Our income will soon decrease."
"My job is physically demanding, and everyone's health conditions are different. Besides, my mom said she'd handle the salon while I'm away."
"Pregnancy isn't an illness, so don't be coddled. If you're like this, our child won't amount to much."
He would even say such things, even though it's his child too.
"If it's my child, it has to be excellent.
You need to make an effort too.
If you become a lazy housewife, I'll divorce you right away."
You've been slacking off with the housework, haven't you?
"The meals are sloppy, and the house is a mess."
"I just can't manage it all right now. I have a limited diet. Can't you at least prepare your own meals?" In fact, he was completely reliant on me for household chores. Growing up in a family business, I was accustomed to housework from a young age. Whereas, it seemed he never had to lift a finger at home, thanks to his mother being so diligent. Men in our family don't do housework. It was his mother Catherine's mantra, suggesting a belief that it was a woman's role. While I admired her dedication to household chores, it resulted in Kent being clueless about even basic tasks like laundry. That was a source of quiet frustration for me. As I was pondering how to discuss this with Kent, I suddenly needed to use the restroom. Those who've been pregnant might understand, but at that time, I needed to go quite often.
"Sorry, I need to use the restroom."
"Again?
"Aren't you getting a bit old for this? When the belly grows, bathroom breaks become more frequent."
How disgraceful.
"You're always complaining about your health lately. It's like living with an old woman."
He then started a long rant about his grievances. But I was desperate to use the restroom. And frankly, I was uncomfortable with his incessant complaints and old woman comparisons, and just wanted to leave. When he finally took a breath,
"I need to use the restroom,"
I managed to say. But he snapped,
"I'm not done talking yet."
Somehow, I endured his lengthy tirade and rushed to the restroom at the last possible moment. How uncool. Behind me, his voice could be heard muttering. Initially, his calm and unflappable demeanor was what attracted me to him. However, since finding out about the pregnancy, it feels like everything is backfiring. Moreover, he compares me to various people he reads about online.
"That celebrity was back to work right after giving birth, and her figure was perfect too. You'll be the same, right?"
"I don't know. Don't compare me to such incredible people so casually."
"You're both human, just give it a try. Don't disappoint me too much."
Apparently, his expectations were ridiculously high. Besides, his information came from the internet, but he naively believed dubious facts. Every time we met, it led to such conversations, creating a tense atmosphere between us. Around the same time our baby was conceived, he started spending less time at home. Our arguments like the ones I just mentioned were one reason, but he also began going out at night or on weekends, claiming it was for work. That was not something we had seen in our life together before. He was the exact opposite of the increasingly popular image of a cooperative, involved father. One night, when he came home late, I decided to confront him. You've been busy with work lately, haven't you?
I'm cultivating new clients. It's none of your business.
But Kent, have you been drinking?
This is my refreshment. Stop nagging.
His voice was so loud it could be heard outside. Sure enough, I could smell the alcohol on his breath. You never had to drink after work before. What's going on?
You wouldn't understand. Besides.
Thus, his sneering began anew.
You're just lazing around at home while I work every day. This isn't fair.
I'm not lazing around. I'm quite busy preparing for the birth.
That's no excuse to neglect the household chores. You don't even put on makeup anymore. It's like you're using pregnancy as an excuse to abandon your femininity.
That's terrible. Holding back tears, I went to put his bag on the shelf, when something small fell to the floor with a clatter. What are they? Wireless earbuds? I picked them up casually and studied them closely. They were small, shaped like earrings, and in a cute pink color that many women would like.
Don't touch my bag without permission. That's an invasion of privacy.
I always do this. But Kent, you don't usually use earbuds, right? If they're lost, we should return them.
That's for me to worry about. Just focus on your chores. Why can't you even manage that properly?
His reaction was far too intense for just pointing out a lost item. As I was about to respond, I felt a dull impact in my abdomen. He had kicked me.
Don't forget you're being provided for. Keep your unnecessary comments to yourself, or I'll have to rethink things.
I couldn't grasp what had just happened to me. After he stormed off to his room, I sat on the floor in a daze, replaying the recent events. I couldn't see how I had done anything to deserve being kicked. I couldn't comprehend his reaction. The next day, just to be safe, I went to the hospital to check on my baby. I couldn't dare say my husband had kicked me, so I lied that I had fallen at home. Fortunately, there were no abnormalities with the baby, but the area where I was kicked was bruised and discolored. Amidst that, some good news arrived. My best friend Sarah had given birth. She had gone to university in England and I heard she settled there for work, but apparently, she had returned to the US. Ideally, I would have brought Kent along, reuniting the trio of friends after such a long time, but unfortunately, he was away on a business trip. Reluctantly, I went to congratulate her by myself. In the bright, sunlit hospital room, Sarah lay in bed, looking relieved. As I entered the room, she struggled to sit up.
It's been a while. Congratulations on your baby.
Thank you. I actually came back to the US about a year ago but couldn't get in touch, sorry. I'm just glad the baby is safely here. She looked more refined than when she was a student, more grown up. By her pillow, I noticed earbuds identical to the ones I found in Kent's bag. She seemed to notice my gaze. Oh, these? They're my favorite. I lost one recently, but my honey found it for me.
Really? What's your husband like?
Actually, we're not married yet. You know what? The guy is. Her words were interrupted by a knock on the door. Entering the room was none other than Kent. I was so shocked, I couldn't speak. You must be surprised. Actually, I'm dating Kent now. She seemed unaware that we were married. She smiled innocently before my eyes.
Hey, long time no see. How's it going?
Kent's shameless demeanor pushed my confusion to the max. It's a reunion of the trio. I started seeing Kent again after returning from England. But with all the paperwork, we haven't married yet. I see. As you can tell, I'm also expecting a baby. I felt an overwhelming urge to reveal everything. But I paused, regaining a bit of calm. I had a baby in my womb. I had to protect my child and myself. I pondered the most effective way to handle this predicament. In the end, I decided to keep things peaceful for now. My husband is on a business trip right now. I really wanted to bring him along today. That's a shame. I wanted to meet your husband. It's really unfortunate. But having a husband like yours who accompanies her must be infinitely better. My husband doesn't help out at all. I secretly glared at Kent. He deliberately looked away. You two look so happy together, I'm almost jealous. Oh dear, to be the odd one out in our trio of friends. Sarah, Kent, I hope you find happiness, no matter what. Sarah nodded with a full-faced smile, while Kent did awkwardly in return. By the way, this is a gift for the baby. I heard you can never have too many bibs, so I got these. I even got matching ones for my baby. That's adorable, thank you. You must be excited about your baby too, Lucy. After a healthy delivery, we should all go out together. At the mention of all of us, Kent's shoulders twitched slightly. I pretended not to notice and continued smiling cheerfully. Hey, let's take a photo while we're here. Sarah, hold the baby. And Kent, get in close. I captured the moment of Sarah holding the baby with Kent beside her in a photo. With a forced smile plastered on my face, I left the hospital room. Before I realized it, I was breathing heavily, my shoulders heaving. From beyond the door, I could hear Sarah's excited voice and Kent's low murmurs. Upon leaving the hospital, I hurried home. I opened my mobile phone and immediately contacted a real estate agent. Yes, I know it's sudden, but I want to sell my house. Yes, right away is fine. I want to complete the process quickly. Could you also refer me to a moving company? I made arrangements to sell the house and contracted a moving company that the real estate agent recommended. Next, I called my in-laws. Catherine? Due to some urgent matters with Kent, I'll be sending over some belongings. Don't be alarmed by the amount. Right, I had decided to erase the house I lived in, as if it never existed. Kent said he would be away on a business trip until the next day. He's probably planning to stay somewhere tonight. While part of me wanted to send the belongings directly to Catherine's house without warning, she wasn't to blame. At least I informed her. After finishing these tasks, I noticed incoming calls from Kent. In fact, since leaving the hospital, he had been calling incessantly. I ignored them and read a book. Then, a message came in. Let's talk, just the two of us. What was there to talk about in that situation? Moreover, since the incident where he kicked my abdomen, a sense of caution towards him had sprouted in my mind. At that time, the caution had turned into suspicion, and I didn't even want to hear his voice. Once home, I immediately started packing. I entered his room and without hesitation began boxing up his belongings. Fortunately, it was the off-season for moving. I was able to sign up for a plan where the movers would help pack, making the shipping process smoother than expected. All that was left was to send my own belongings. After contacting my parents, they rushed over and the move was completed promptly. There was something I found in Kent's room. It was a partially completed divorce application. He was planning to leave me for Sarah and marry her. It seemed convenient, so I filled in the rest of the divorce application and decided to keep it safe. Just then, I received a call from Catherine.
Lucy, I knew you were sending some things over, but I had no idea it would be this much. What on earth happened?
The truth is, Kent has been having an affair. Do you remember Sarah from high school? It seems he has a child with her. I could sense her shock over the phone. Despite feeling sorry for her, I continued. I'm sorry, but I have proof. I'll send you a photo. I sent her the photo I took in the hospital room of Sarah, the baby, and Kent together.
I don't want to believe it, but it's true, isn't it?
I wish it wasn't. But it is. I'll be staying at my parents' house from tonight. She apparently tried to contact Kent after that, but couldn't reach him. When she asked if I knew where he might be, I unexpectedly replied that he was no longer family to me. She understood my determination from my response. That evening, I took my essentials and returned to my parents' house, sleeping peacefully in my old room. The next morning, Kent contacted me.
Hey! Our house is empty and there's a for sale sign up. What's going on?
Don't you understand? Your home isn't there anymore. For now, your belongings are at your parents' house. I'm changing the locks tomorrow, so coming back would be pointless.
What have you done? Let's talk, at least.
Fine. How about this afternoon at your parents' house? I'll contact your mother. I ended the call quickly and started preparing to go out. That afternoon, the involved parties gathered at my in-laws' house. Kent's parents, my parents, Kent, and me. Catherine's face was noticeably pale. Surprisingly, she was the first to speak. Kent, is it true that you've been having an affair with your friend Sarah? Affair? No, we just started dating later, that's all. I don't want to hear excuses. And now there's a child involved. Looks like we were just really compatible. The next moment, Catherine punched Kent.
What have you done? Lucy is carrying your child. How could you face her?
I had never seen the usually calm and elegant her like that. A trickle of blood ran from Kent's nose, but he seemed unaware. Ouch. What are you doing? It's natural for a child to come from a loving relationship.
How can you even say that?
I interrupted the parent-child argument. First of all, how did you end up dating Sarah?
I ran into her at the bus terminal while I was out on business. She had just returned to the US and was busy with a new job. She had a charm you didn't, Lucy.
That's not a reason to start a relationship, is it?
Ever since high school, I actually liked Sarah. But she was out of reach, so I settled for you.
I was speechless at his brazen words.
Meeting Sarah again and reminiscing made me realize she didn't have bad feelings for me. There's no reason to stop us now.
He had kept his marriage a secret from Sarah. When Sarah became pregnant soon after they started dating, he considered divorcing me. Around the same time, I became pregnant too. He reached that point without the courage to divorce or the determination to remarry.
How can you justify such selfishness? Aren't you ashamed of two-timing?
Sarah and Lucy are completely different.
Reuniting with Sarah made me realize how unsatisfied I was with Lucy. I plan to remarry Sarah and step up as a man. Don't be absurd. To think my son could do something like this, I'm so disappointed.
Catherine's anger knew no bounds.
If that's how you feel, our parent-child bond is over. You're also fired from the company. You're on your own from now on.
That's fine by me. Honestly, I was skeptical. Could Kent, who had only worked in a small family business, really handle another job?
You have no idea. The reason you could work till now is thanks to Lucy's salon.
What? Lucy's salon?
That small town shop doesn't significantly impact my performance. The only reason you had any success was because her shop promoted our products. Ungrateful.
Listening silently, my parents announced they would cease business with Kent's company.
It can't be helped. I'll start my own business. I'm still young, I can learn. With Sarah returning to work soon after giving birth, our new life is secure.
I muttered into my mobile phone, so he says. Suddenly, a loud voice echoed.
Are you stupid?
From the beginning of the discussion, I had been on a video call with Sarah.
If I knew you were married to Lucy, I wouldn't have been involved. It's like I'm betraying her too. I'm speechless at your naivety. Frankly, you lack talent as a business person. Why are you there? I got in touch with Lucy and decided to join this discussion. I'm glad I heard everything. I never want to see you again. Wait, don't leave me. Why should I be with someone as awful as you? I'll raise the baby alone, just don't show your face. Of course, I will expect child support.
Realizing remarriage was off the table, Kent suddenly turned to me, almost pleading.
Lucy, I was wrong. Let's forget everything and raise our child together.
Continue this marriage with such a despicable man? No way. I can't forget the terrible things you've done. The shock of seeing he appear in Sarah's hospital room was fresh in my mind.
Don't spoil the mood. Isn't your kindness your best quality?
Unable to give up, he was staring intently at me. His mouth agape, his nose bloodied and clotted, he was a picture of disgrace. I shook my head slowly. Just because things didn't work out with Sarah, you think you can come back to me? That's too convenient.
But what about you? You'll struggle too, won't you? How do you plan to raise the child?
I have skills, and I'm much better off without a husband like you. I'm not foolish enough to cling to a foolish man. My parents had discussed it with me on the previous day, and they assured me of their full support. Being in customer service, they have good contacts with reputable law firms. I presented the divorce application I had found in his drawer. As you can see, the divorce application is all set. All that's left is to file it. Let's quickly settle the compensation and child support.
Wait, I have to pay both Sarah and you.
Of course. I am your wife, after all. But don't think I'll overlook any negligence towards Sarah's situation either. I have a lawyer ready. He was at his wit's end. At that moment, I felt an unprecedented pain in my abdomen. Oh my, it hurts. My labor had started right at that moment. The discussion was obviously adjourned, and I was rushed to the local hospital by my parents. From there, everything happened so quickly. Exhausted from the stress of the discussion and the labor, I fell into a deep sleep in the hospital bed. Even when the nurses woke me up occasionally, I barely opened my eyes. After being discharged and returning home with my baby, I asked my parents about the current situation. My mother, as a hairdresser, had subtly spread rumors about Kent among her clients. Our customers are mostly housewives. A word or two from her was exaggerated and spread quickly throughout the town. On the other hand, Kent tried to start an internet sales company, something he was always interested in. He seemed to have underestimated personal connections, seeking solace in the internet. However, his capabilities did not match the power of word of mouth. The rumors prevented him from finding a bank to finance his business, and it failed to take off. He tasted the bitter consequences of underestimating the local community network he had belittled. There was another thing that damaged him. The video call with Sarah. She had used another camera to record the entire discussion. She edited Kent's selfish behavior into a short video and spread it among our high school classmates. As a result, he lost all his friends, and those who might have helped him also turned away. He was left to solve everything on his own. He was immediately kicked out of his family home and spent his days in a motel, depleting his savings while searching for a new home and job. Being unemployed and without a stable address, it was hard for him to settle down. Eventually, he moved to a distant land as it became uncomfortable for him to stay in the city. He finally found a part-time day job, struggling with the unfamiliar physical labor. Sure, there was no mercy. I warned him that if he ever missed a child support payment, I would sue him for assault for kicking me in the stomach. The photos I took of my injuries in case something happened to the baby proved to be useful. The medical records from when I was treated at the hospital for the injuries would also serve as significant evidence. I filed the divorce papers, and almost concurrently with giving birth, I became a single mother. I was not living alone though. I rent a house and decided to live with Sarah. It was the four of us, Sarah, our babies, and me. The children got along as if they were siblings. Sarah and I were best friends to begin with. With Kent out of the picture, our friendship as women only grew stronger. When one of us needed to step out, the other would take care of both babies, allowing us to manage work and have some time to refresh. We're already talking about taking our kids to the park together for the first time once they're a bit older. For now, I'm looking forward to enjoying this comfortable life.
The numbers don't add up. You've been cheating.
Ben's angry voice echoes in my ears. Despite having just sipped a cafe latte, I feel terribly ill. I'm 10 months pregnant, and instead of showing remorse for making me drink milk, an allergen for me, Ben accuses me of infidelity.
No, help me.
I lack the energy to deny his suspicion clearly. My hoarse whisper bursts in front of him and fades away swiftly.
Acting won't help you. I won't be fooled. It's not like your allergy is a big deal.
Convinced that I'm cheating, he, seeing me in agony, doesn't help but leaves the house, still doubting me. What should I do? It's all over. With the last of my strength, I try to call someone on my mobile phone. But my weak hands let the phone slip away. Please. Someone help me. My name is Emma. I'm a 33-year-old housewife, living with my husband Ben, a classmate. We met through a mutual friend 2 years ago. Both past 30, we were already considering marriage, so when we met through our friend, we were acutely aware of each other as potential life partners. Ben works for a trading company, with a satisfying salary and handsome looks. Excuse me for asking, but why haven't you married until now? I knew it was blunt, but out of genuine curiosity, I asked him right there. Actually, I had a fiancé until 6 months ago, but it was called off. I was looking for a new partner since then. He answered cheerfully. I nodded in understanding. Being jilted must have been hard. I hadn't experienced it, but I could understand the pain in his heart. After that, we had a lively conversation about trivial things, like our hobbies and how we spend our days off. We shared interests in visiting art galleries and watching movies, making me feel that if we dated and married, we'd spend enjoyable days together. We hit it off and parted ways, agreeing to contact each other in a week. I was amazed at how quickly things progressed, but dating him felt comfortable, allowing me to be myself without undue stress. Being with him, I knew I could be myself. Instinctively feeling this, I started making moves on him. It seemed like he reciprocated my feelings, and just a month after meeting, we started dating. It was a whirlwind romance, totally different from any relationship I'd had before. But I already knew he was a good man, handsome and with a great income, so honestly, I wanted to secure him as my future partner. Our relationship progressed smoothly, and a year after we started dating, we got married. He proposed during a dinner on a cruise ship on my birthday. I have a milk allergy, so he made sure that my courses were prepared with soy milk instead. I really appreciated these thoughtful gestures from him. He was my pride and joy. Naturally, I accepted the engagement ring and carefully placed it on my left ring finger. I had dreamt of this moment, but having it become reality made me wonder if it was all a dream. That's how happy I was. "I'll cherish you for life, Emma," he said, his cheeks slightly flushed from the wine, and kissed my cheek. That night was the epitome of happiness, savoring the joy of marrying him. Soon after, we registered our marriage and moved into our own place. "How about near your parents' place, Emma? It's close to my work too, and it'll be reassuring, right?" "Really? That's great, thank you." Knowing I was an only child, he suggested living near my parents, thinking they'd worry. With the possibility of raising children in the future, I was truly grateful, as I'd likely need my parents' help. My family, including relatives, all lived nearby. As a child, my cousin Henry used to play with me a lot. So, starting a new life near my parents was a dream come true. After moving in, I quickly realized something about Ben. He didn't do any housework at all. But as I became a full-time housewife, I thought I was okay with it. However, as time passed, I realized he wasn't just avoiding chores, he was also making a mess everywhere. No matter how much I cleaned, it would quickly become untidy again. I did bring it up with him once. "Hey, can you try to keep the room a bit tidier? Like, at least put your dirty clothes in the laundry basket?" I tried to say it as gently as I could. But he didn't like being told what to do. "It's bothersome, I don't want to," he replied curtly. Sighing, I picked up his scattered clothes. Aside from his messiness, there wasn't much else to complain about. On his days off, he would take me out on dates. We went to see movies we liked or visited limited-time art exhibits. It was a fulfilling married life. However, things started to change when I found out I was pregnant. When my period was unusually late, I checked and got a positive result. I immediately went to the OBGYN and was told I was pregnant. I was overjoyed at the thought of having a child with him. Just knowing I had the person I loved's child inside me made the world seem brighter. When Ben got home that day, I couldn't wait to share the big news. "Guess what? I'm pregnant," I announced, unable to hide my excitement. "Really?" Ben seemed taken aback. "Yes, really. I'm 2 months along. The baby will be here in 10 months, so we have some time, but it's so exciting." I noticed a cloud of confusion shadow his face. 2 months? Yes. He seemed to mull over something. "What's wrong? Aren't you happy?" "Well, it's just that," Ben responded cryptically, leaving me hanging without any further explanation. Did he not want a child with me? We had casually discussed children before marriage, and he seemed eager to have as many as possible. So why wasn't he sharing my joy now? Despite feeling unsettled, the fact remained, I was pregnant. I tried to convince myself that he was just caught off guard. After all, it's often said that fatherhood takes time to sink in. It wouldn't be surprising if he needed time to adjust to the sudden news of pregnancy. But from that day on, he became noticeably distant. He offered no help with household chores, even as I struggled with morning sickness. I knew he wasn't keen on housework, but I had hoped he'd step up when I was in need. "I'm sorry, but I'm feeling really sick today. I don't think I can cook," I told Ben before he left for work.
"What?"
His response was far from sympathetic.
"I've never cooked before, and you expect me to start now? Pregnancy isn't an illness. You're a stay-at-home wife, Emma. Your job is the household, sick or not. I go to work even when I'm not feeling well."
He glared at me as if he was in the right. Sure, he went to work even when feeling under the weather, but everyone's condition is different. To me, barely able to get out of bed, his words felt harsh. "But I really can't move," I pleaded with him. He snorted dismissively. "Fine. I'll eat out today," he said, leaving the house. I never thought it would come to this. I sighed to myself. I had always believed that we would build a happy family together. But his attitude changed since my pregnancy was disheartening. Had I been so wrong about him? That night, he returned home drunk. I had barely eaten all day due to feeling nauseous. I hoped, maybe foolishly, that he might have brought something back for me to eat, but he came empty-handed. Given his recent behavior, I couldn't help but feel resigned to it. Was I just an afterthought to him? Could it be that he doesn't even want a child? That thought saddened me deeply. Even as morning sickness passed and I entered the stable period, his attitude didn't change. In fact, it felt like he became harsher as I got better.
"One of these days, my colleagues want to come over to our place,"
he announced one day after work.
"Colleagues? How many?"
5. Might be more.
"I want you to cook for them. Don't serve anything subpar. I don't want them to think my wife can't cook."
"What? 5 is quite a lot. Can our place even accommodate that many? Plus, I don't think I can handle that much right now." Even though I was in a stable period, I didn't feel up to hosting and cooking for a large group. Besides cooking, there'd be a lot to manage. The thought of handling it all by myself was overwhelming.
"It'll be fine, you're in your stable period now. So, this weekend, expect them. And remember, don't embarrass me."
He said this nonchalantly and whistled his way to the bathroom. I was filled with anxiety. True to his word, he brought 5 colleagues over that weekend. 4 men and 1 woman, an odd balance that made me wonder. But considering he worked in sales at a trading company, maybe female employees were few. "Hi, I'm and looking forward to today." The only woman, and greeted cheerfully. With her long hair swept to the side and striking features, she was notably pretty. She looked to be in her late 20s, younger than me, and her elegance made me instantly nervous. "Nice to meet you. My husband always speaks highly of you all. I can't offer much, but please make yourselves at home." Trying to act the part of a boss's wife, I ushered everyone to their seats. As I started preparing the meal in the kitchen, Ben and his 6 guests chatted about work and rumors. And seemed to be the life of the party, nodding and interjecting with sharp comments. I felt entirely out of place in that circle. Resolved to stay in the background, I continued my work quietly. When I served the meal, everyone seemed to enjoy it. "Is this cream stew made with soy milk?" and asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Yes, that's right. I'm allergic to milk, so I use soy milk for dishes that usually require it." "Interesting." And seemed to accept my explanation and resumed eating.
"Come on, just because you're allergic to milk doesn't mean you should serve our guests with soy milk. Use real milk next time."
Ben chimed in. Expecting such a remark, I couldn't help but sigh.
"I need to eat too, so it has to be soy milk. You could have made separate dishes,"
he retorted.
"But I can't taste it if I do that."
Our colleagues looked on, shocked by our conversation.
"Sorry, everyone. She claims to be allergic to milk." It's probably just a preference.
Ben scoffed. The colleague seemed uncomfortable, not sure how to react. Soy milk is delicious too. Please, enjoy your meal while it's hot, I said, trying to keep the mood light. Onlyan seemed deep in thought, remaining silent. The dinner went by, leaving me exhausted. I hoped he might thank me, but he just went to bed without a word. Our communication had dwindled. And this, along with his dismissive remarks about my allergy, made me feel increasingly frustrated. Months passed, and I was now 10 months pregnant. He kept coming home late, and we barely talked. The absence of our previous joyful dates filled me with loneliness. As the baby's arrival neared, I longed to cherish our time together. But he never initiated any moments like that. Then one day, he entered the living room, carrying a large bag and a familiar cup. It was from a coffee chain we used to frequent during happier times. I'm going on a business trip for 3 days. I went for a walk this morning and stumbled upon this coffee shop, so I bought this. Soy latte, remember? Yes, it's been a while. It was unusual for him to go for a walk in the morning. Stumbling upon a coffee shop and buying soy lattes seemed out of character, considering his recent behavior. He waited with a smile for me to take the soy latte. Was this a change of heart? I felt a glimmer of hope that the kind Ben I knew was returning. I wanted to go for walks with him again. Maybe after the baby was settled. I eagerly took the soy latte and drank it. It tasted familiar at first, but something was off. Is this milk? By the time I realized, it was too late. The cup slipped from my grasp. Ben's face twisted into a satisfied smirk. Hard to breathe. My breathing became labored as I slumped to the ground. I've always had my doubts. Is the child in your belly really mine? He questioned. What? I was utterly shocked by his accusation, suggesting the baby might belong to someone else. When you said you were 2 months pregnant, it didn't add up. I couldn't recall any encounter from 2 months ago. But that's... I wanted to explain to him that he was misunderstanding something, but I couldn't find my breath to defend myself. The numbers don't add up. You've been cheating. His accusation resonated in my ears. Despite not having much of the cafe latte, I felt terribly ill. 10 months pregnant, and instead of showing remorse for making me drink milk, an allergen, he was accusing me of infidelity. No, it's not like that. Help me. I didn't have the energy to clearly deny his suspicion. My raspy voice burst in front of him and quickly faded away. Acting won't help. I'm not fooled. Allergies aren't that serious. Convinced I was cheating, he, instead of helping me in my agony, left the house, still doubting me. What should I do? It's all over. With the last of my strength, I tried to call someone on my mobile phone. But my weak hands let the phone slip away. Please. Someone help. Desperately crying out in my mind, my consciousness began to fade. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was the white walls and ceiling, and I realized I was in a hospital. I was saved. As I felt relieved, I noticed someone's face peering in from the edge of my vision. Emma! You're awake! Henry. It was Henry, my cousin who lived nearby. Emma, you called me, and when I answered, I heard nothing at first, so I thought it was a mistake. But then I heard labored breathing and realized something was wrong. I rushed to your house, the front door was open, and I found you collapsed in the living room. It was a shock. I called an ambulance and had you taken to the hospital right away. Henry earnestly explained what happened after I collapsed. I remembered calling him just before I collapsed. He had always been like a big brother to me, caring for me. I thought he would come if there was an emergency. But before I could ask for help, I dropped the phone. I was in awe of him for sensing the emergency and rushing to help. I'll call the doctor. Wait here, he said and left the room. After a while, he returned with the doctor. The doctor explained that I had an anaphylactic shock due to drinking milk, but somehow managed to save me and the baby. Hearing that just a few more minutes could have endangered the baby's life, or left me with lasting disabilities, sent chills down my spine. My being here, awake in the hospital, was all thanks to Henry.
Henry, thank you, really. No need to thank me. But how did this happen?
His confusion was understandable. It was unthinkable for me, allergic to milk, to drink it willingly. Well, actually, I told him everything about my marriage with Ben up to this point. Ben and I thought we were meant for each other and got married. We had similar hobbies and always enjoyed our dates. Life was happy after marriage, at least for a while. But as soon as I got pregnant, his attitude changed drastically. Looking back, I still can't pinpoint what went wrong. Henry, arms crossed, seemed to be pondering the reason too.
Ben's behavior changed after you told him about the pregnancy, right?
Yes.
When I said I was 2 months pregnant, he thought the calculation was off. He convinced himself I cheated and did this as revenge, I guess.
Henry's face hardened as I replied.
Revenge or not, this is too much. Feeding you milk when you're allergic.
What was he thinking? Anger was clearly visible in his eyes. I felt moved by his anger on my behalf.
I can't believe it. If it weren't for you, Henry, neither the baby nor I would have made it.
Just thinking about what could have happened without his help sent shivers down my spine. Filled with a mix of relief and a desire for retribution against Ben, I asked,
"What should I do about Ben?"
Henry, seemingly pondering the same thing, asked me back.
Of course, I can't just let this go. I need to see that he's punished.
As I responded,
"If that's the case,"
he began, "I have a plan." After hearing his plan to deal with Ben, I couldn't wait to confront him. The plan was to be executed upon my discharge from the hospital when I first saw Ben. I resolved to follow Henry's advice when I met Ben. But the plan had to be put into action sooner than I thought. 3 days into my hospital stay, I received a call from Ben. It happened while Henry was visiting me. I hesitated to pick up the phone, and the call ended. But Ben called again immediately.
So persistent,
I muttered, staring at the incessantly ringing phone. The phone stopped briefly, only to ring once more. As the cycle repeated, I looked at Henry, silently seeking advice.
"Let's execute the plan now, a bit earlier than expected." "Understood,"
I replied. Nervously, I picked up the mobile phone, pressed the call button, turned on the speaker, and placed it on the table.
"Hello, Emma?"
Finally, you answer.
"Seriously? I returned from my business trip, and you were nowhere to be found. I've been searching all over for you. Running away from home, what's that about? Thanks to you, I haven't had dinner."
His angry voice filled the hospital room. If I had held the phone to my ear, it would have hurt from the loudness. Ben, showing no concern for me, immediately started yelling. He was the one who made me drink milk and sent me to the hospital. His complaint about not having dinner was ridiculous, considering he never cooks. If he can't cook, he should eat out, but he doesn't even do that. It's like dealing with a child. While listening to Ben's angry words, I exchanged a resolute nod with Henry.
"Excuse me, but who am I speaking to?"
I deliberately lowered my tone to confuse Ben.
What? What are you talking about?"
Ben sounded baffled on the other end. Henry and I exchanged a knowing look and smirked.
"I don't know who you are. The mobile phone screen says Ben, so are you perhaps my husband?"
"What?" He sounded completely perplexed. It made sense. After repeatedly calling his wife, he finally got through, only to hear nonsensical words. I glanced at Henry again and smirked. Henry nodded in agreement. Then Henry took the mobile phone from me and began to speak to Ben.
"Hello, Ben. My name is Henry." I heard Emma's voice on the phone and took over the call.
"What? Henry? Who are you?"
"Are you the father of Emma's child? So you're the one she's been cheating with?"
Ben hastily accused Henry in a stern tone.
"Cheating? What are you talking about? I'm Emma's cousin. Actually, Emma is currently suffering from amnesia." Amnesia?
Yes, this was the plan Henry and I devised. I would pretend to have lost my memory to confuse Ben. The goal was to get Ben to admit that he was the one who gave me the milk. The plan was supposed to be executed when we met in person, but Ben's call accelerated things. No problem, though. It might even be more convenient over the phone since he can't see my face.
Don't you know? Emma collapsed from anaphylactic shock 3 days ago due to a cafe latte she drank.
What? Ben seemed clueless about such matters, tilting his head on the other end of the line.
She nearly died after ingesting milk, an allergen. The baby was almost affected too. Emma lost her memory due to the psychological shock. You were the one who gave her the drink, right?
Henry's tone was stern. Ben let out a small cry of disbelief.
No.
What do you mean no?
It was me who gave it to her, and told me to do it.
Ben's voice trembled. Hearing this shocking revelation, Henry and I exchanged glances. Then, from the other end of the phone, a woman's voice exclaimed,
"Wait a minute."
We were stunned. It was Anne. I remembered her well as one of Ben's colleagues who had visited our house before. She was the beautiful one. Was Ben cheating with Anne?
Why am I getting blamed? You were the one who made her drink it, weren't you? You said giving her the allergic milk would make her bedridden for days, so we could go on a trip without her noticing, right? Yeah, but you gave her too much.
Ben and Anne began arguing. From their conversation, it seemed Anne had known about my milk allergy and planned to make me slightly ill so they could travel without worries. Ben and Anne were clearly having an affair. After all his accusations of my supposed infidelity, Ben was the one cheating. I felt nauseated by his hypocrisy. I exchanged a look with Henry and took back the phone.
Thank you for your time. I've recorded everything you just said.
Hearing my voice, supposedly amnesiac, Ben and gasped on the other end.
What? What do you mean?
Sorry, the amnesia was a lie.
It was a ruse to get you to admit you gave me the milk. Thanks to that, I also got your confession of cheating. I'll be claiming a substantial compensation.
I said it cheerfully, and Ben and both shouted in disbelief. How foolish can they be? Henry and I were astounded by their lack of awareness of the severity of their actions.
That's terrible. You were cheating too, weren't you? Then the compensation should be split, right? No, it's your fault for cheating first. I thought of cheating with and because of you. So, no need for compensation, right?
Ben's triumphant tone was grossly misguided.
When did I say I cheated? It's obvious if you count the pregnancy weeks.
Ben was clearly mistaken. I set him straight.
Pregnancy weeks are counted from the end of the last menstrual period. Not knowing that and suspecting me of cheating, then deciding to cheat yourself, that's despicable.
I'm divorcing you.
Prepare for a hefty compensation.
I yelled with all my might and hung up forcefully. Then I blocked Ben's calls. Finally, peace returned. Henry, really, thank you.
No, I didn't want to see Emma sad. I'm glad you could set Ben straight.
We sighed in relief, facing each other. I was going to have a child without a father, but it's decidedly better than having a father like Ben. Later, Henry and I submitted the voice recorder data with Ben and Anne's confessions to the police. They were promptly arrested and are currently being interrogated. A colleague of Ben's, who visited us before, said it was clear even at their workplace that Ben and Anne were together. One of the colleague, Mike, confessed.
I regret not speaking up sooner.
But I understand it takes courage to expose a colleague's wrongdoing. I reassured Mike it was okay. Ben's previous engagement had been called off due to his sudden change in behavior. A revelation that made perfect sense. Additionally, it was discovered that Ben and Anne had used company business trips as a cover for their personal vacations multiple times, leading to their dismissal for misusing company funds. After their release from prison, they'll be starting life from scratch, having lost their jobs. The compensation they owe me is substantial. They paid it off with loans, but I wonder what they plan to do next. Sometimes I think they might be better off in prison, given the gravity of their crimes. Taking my allergy lightly, poisoning me with milk, and their infidelity. I have no sympathy for them. I hope they deeply reflect on their actions while with the police. Meanwhile, I gave birth to a baby girl and am currently living at my parents' house, where they help me raise her. Henry often visits and helps with the baby, which I greatly appreciate. When she gets a bit older, how about we go out together? Henry suggested sincerely. Yes. I nodded with a smile. Perhaps there's a future where Henry and I end up together. These hopeful thoughts fill my mind. So if you've taken painkillers, you shouldn't be in pain anymore. Vacuum the floor. He stared on the painkiller package I had just taken. I will. Please wait a little for the medicine to work. When I told him that, he sighed loudly and stood up. It's not like I was asking him to do the chores, he could have waited a bit. I was holding back my sigh, then a sharp pain shot through my back. As I fell to the floor, I saw my husband, Stephen, sitting indecently with one leg on the back of the sofa. I shocked and wondered, did he just kick me, as he laughed coldly.
It's enough with the period pain excuses. Just vacuum the floor now.
My name is Mary. I'm 27 years old. I'm a typical housewife living with my husband, Stephen. I met Stephen when I joined the company where he worked. After graduating from college, I took a job in sales. Stephen was my mentor there. He was handsome with short hair, and his good looks and conversation skills attracted customers. In a sales job, successful individuals are those who possess extensive knowledge and information about the products they are selling, and can utilize these insights in their sales approach. Alternatively, it's said there's another type of successful salesperson is who can make the customer feeling to sign a contract. Stephen was definitely the latter. Initially, I only had respect for him as a successful salesman. But when I was struggling to make deals, Stephen reached out to me. Gradually, I began confiding in him. While we were going out and having meals together, and developed my feelings for him. Therefore, I was overjoyed when we started dating and ecstatic when he proposed. Our married life was filled with happiness. But there was one thing that always troubled me. The fact that I have suffered from severe menstrual pain since my school days. Initially, I used mild over-the-counter painkillers, but as my body got used to them, I needed stronger medication to get through my daily life. When we were dating, Stephen would adjust his plans according to my cycle and would comfort me when I complained about the pain. I thought this care would continue after marriage. But I was wrong. Every month, the same menstrual pain occurred. Seeing me struggle to do housework without medication, Stephen would just sigh. This didn't just start in the last few years, get used to it. He started saying that to me. We both work, but Stephen earns more and contributes a larger amount to our living expenses. My earnings wouldn't be enough for living both of us, so I put extra effort into housework. During my period, I would finish as much housework as I could while the painkillers were effective, then rest a bit on the sofa before resuming. I was doing everything in order, but to Stephen, it seemed like I was just lying down and resting. No matter how much I did, he never offered a word of comfort. Then one day, we bought a new house. We had been living in an apartment, but we purchased a larger home in case we had children. Stephen's parents love socializing and often host parties with relatives. Stephen thought it was a perfect opportunity to show off our new house, and decided to invite the relatives for a party at our place. Once he made up his mind, Stephen was quick to act. He set the date for the party and handed me a list of relatives who would be attending. The list included not only names but also ages and food preferences. To my surprise, Stephen, "Make sure to prepare dishes that cater to everyone's preferences. I won't forgive any shortcuts like buying ready-made appetizers," he said in an annoyed tone. It was challenging to plan the menu as everyone had different likes and dislikes, and some favorite foods of one person were disliked by another. After days of sleepless nights for planning the menu, my period started behind than I expected. I took painkillers, finished cleaning the rooms, and decorated them with flowers the day before. I placed air fresheners and repeatedly went over the next day's party steps in my mind.
Then that night, after preparing the menu, finally I went to bed. While I was preparing with the help of painkillers, Stephen had daily evening drinking and laughing loudly at the TV.
I remembered Stephen like that as I fell asleep in bed. The next morning, I got up before Stephen to make breakfast and started cooking for the party while tidying up. I was checking the time constantly and kept moving. I arranged the finished dishes on the table and carefully checked every area, from the entrance to the living room and the bathroom.
But it seemed the effect of the painkillers was wearing off, as I could no longer to bear the gradually intensifying pain, so sat down on the sofa. I wanted to lie down, but since I had managed to do my hair and makeup nicely, and didn't know when the relatives would arrive, I decided to just sit. As I turned my gaze towards Stephen, he was watching TV, a glass of alcohol in hand. Despite the fact that relatives were about to arrive, I wanted to say "don't start drinking now" to Stephen, but the words wouldn't come out.
Noticing my gaze, Stephen glared at me.
"What? You're giving me that 'don't drink at this time' look?" "It's not that. I'm getting nervous too. And you're just lounging on the sofa. You finished the preparations, right?"
Stephen put his glass on the table and walked towards me.
I felt a strange tension in his stare, a bad feeling growing inside me. Everything is in order. But my period started, and the painkiller's effect is wearing off, so I'm taking a short break. I'll get moving soon.
Stephen sighed and glared at me.
"Don't coddle yourself over a mere stomachache. My mom never did that."
Right after those words, just as I thought Stephen had come up behind me, I was suddenly kicked in my back and fell off the sofa to the floor. By the time I realized that I had been kicked by someone, I was already on the floor, and it took me a while to grasp what had happened. Meanwhile, Stephen sat down on the sofa nonchalantly. And, unbelievably, he started playing games on his mobile phone. I couldn't understand what was happening or the situation I was in. All I knew was that Stephen, without a single word of apology, was laughing and enjoying his game. When I tried to stand up, suddenly Stephen fell to the floor. Looking up to see why he fell, I saw Stephen's dad, Paul. He was standing behind the sofa.
Paul looked furious, and I couldn't take my eyes off him. "What's going on?"
Stephen couldn't be understanding the situation and checked the sofa in panic.
"Oh, Paul? Did you just push me?"
While Stephen was picking up his phone from the floor, and he asked Paul. "I didn't push you, I shoved you, Stephen."
"What? Why would Paul shove me?" "You fools, what do you mean for kicking someone in the back? And that someone is your wife, Stephen."
Stephen seemed a bit taken aback by Paul's anger. "I was just a bit bold because I was drinking." Stephen tried to respond, but Paul glared at him, his excuse not mitigating the situation.
"Don't blame it on the alcohol. Whatever the reason, a man should never resort to violence against a woman."
"What do you mean by reason?" "This is like discipline."
"Discipline?"
"Yes, she was resting on the sofa even though the preparations weren't finished. So I was teaching her that if you don't work you don't have a rest. It's part of discipline." "Right, Mary?" Suddenly asked by Stephen. I didn't know how to respond.
I had properly finished the preparations and sat on the sofa just to rest a bit.
Should I tell the truth because I did everything correctly? As I hesitated, Paul also turned his gaze towards me.
"Mary, is what Stephen's saying true?" I couldn't find the words to reply. If I told the truth, Stephen might get scolded by Paul and spoil his mood, especially with relatives about to arrive.
I didn't want to cause any trouble for the relatives who were coming to see our new house. I was about to agree with Stephen.
"Mary, your silence is an answer, isn't it?"
Eh? Confused by Paul's words, then I asked back.
If what Stephen said was true, Mary would have immediately agreed. But Mary is silent. That suggests that something, or everything is not true what Stephen said.
I felt as if Paul had seen through everything. I opened my mouth to tell the truth. The preparations are already done. It's just that I am feeling a bit unwell today.
What? It's just your period.
Stephen interrupted my words. Unable to say it directly in front of Paul, I tried to phrase it differently, but Stephen's lack of tact brought my tears from my eyes. Saying you're unwell over a mere period. If the preparations are done, then say so. I thought Mary was just lazily sitting on the sofa again, not finishing the preparations. Stephen's words were final. He didn't remember what I said earlier about almost finishing the preparations. He hadn't seen that I had been preparing since early morning, or rather, since yesterday, doing all the work myself without his help. He wasn't aware that I had taken painkillers to manage. He had decided to host the party here on his own and didn't help with any other preparations or cooking. A sense of injustice began to grow inside me. Listen to this. She's been complaining about severe menstrual pain since before we got married, but she still can't get used to the pain. Every month it's like this. My mom was never like this, right, Paul? It seems I was right to come early to help Mary since you said you would entertain us as the inconsiderate host.
What? I'm inconsiderate? Not Mary? Yes, it's you! You insisted on having the party here but didn't cooperate with Mary in preparations. Had you worked together, you would have understood how hard she worked and how much she was suffering. Instead, you started drinking before guests arrived. The one who was lounging around was you, Stephen.
Stephen was clearly frightened by Paul's yelling.
I didn't want Stephen to end up regretting like I do. I tried to educate you with that feeling.
Paul pulled a chair from the dining table, sat down, and sighed heavily. Patricia was like Mary, suffered from severe menstrual pain. Being a man, I had no knowledge about menstruation, and it wasn't an information-rich era like now. Plus, her mother used to say she was weak for not managing her condition, so I thought menstrual pain was just a lack of self-management. Paul spoke slowly, seemingly recalling the past. Back then, painkillers were weak. Patricia, a housewife living with in-laws, was forced to do all the chores, even during severe menstrual pain. Then, Patricia collapsed. We rushed her to the hospital, and she was diagnosed with endometriosis, which shattered her dream of giving Stephen siblings. Eh? Stephen asked Paul in a small voice. It varies by individual, and not everyone ends up like that. But excessive endurance of menstrual pain can lead to illness, and Patricia did become ill. She faced stress from housework, childcare, inconsiderate to parents' in-laws, and an unsupportive husband, eventually leading to infertility. I blamed the era, and also her mother, but it was all wrong. I should have understood for her. We can't experience their pain, so I should have listened and accepted her reality. But I didn't, and it was my fault, blindly agreeing with her mother. I regret not knowing and still do. Patricia supported Paul's shoulder as he spoke in a somber tone. I could only eye contact to Patricia in acknowledgement, who wore a sad smile as she said, "Sorry for intruding." Paul tried hard to understand. Despite his busy work, he often helped with chores and even cut ties with his own parents. Patricia looked at Paul lovingly. It was the least I could do. I didn't want to burden Patricia anymore. I wanted us three to live happily, so I did what I had to. But cutting ties with parents is a big decision. I didn't want you to have to make such decisions, so I tried to show you my mistakes. But it seems none of it got through to you. Unable to bear the tense atmosphere, Stephen spoke in an inappropriately cheerful voice.
Paul, you're exaggerating. In my memory, Mom was sick in bed, but I don't remember her being bedridden due to her period. Maybe you're just remembering it as worse than it was?
Patricia's hand on Paul's shoulder trembled slightly. Gently stroking her hand, Paul glared at Stephen. You just forgot. Patricia didn't want to worry you and tried to hide it as much as possible. If pain were just a matter of willpower, it wouldn't lead to illness. But virtually, Patricia did suffer from menstrual pain and had to lie in bed. I remember you coming home from school and complaining about her always sleeping. I even talked to you about it, explaining it wasn't laziness but a health issue. You didn't care, did you? Not only did you ignore Mary, but you also never saw Patricia's struggles. Paul's words weighed heavily on Stephen, his shoulders visibly drooping. I didn't know what to say or if it was even my place to speak in such an atmosphere. Then, the doorbell rang. It was 5 minutes before the appointed time, and I hurried to answer the door, cradling my aching stomach. On the screen, relatives were visible. I quickly responded and rushed to the entrance. Opening the door, the relatives greeted us with a bouquet arranged for our new housewarming. I thanked them and led them into the living room with due respect. As the relatives entered the living room, the atmosphere was still tense between the parents-in-law and Stephen, causing the relatives to exchange glances. What happened, Paul? One of the relatives asked Paul. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Stephen's new house. Sorry for the bad atmosphere, we were just arguing. Does arguing usually mess up the sofa and cushions like this? He misunderstood Mary resting on the sofa due to poor health as laziness and pushed her off. I was scolding him for that. Hearing Paul's words, the relatives' expressions turned to disbelief, and a younger-looking woman came over to me. Are you okay? You must be tired from all the preparations. I shook my head in response. No, just severe menstrual pain. Just? What did you say? There's menstrual leave at work, you know. I've used it too. Everyone's pain varies, but when it's really bad, you can apply for it at work. Why can't you rest at home? She said this and turned to Stephen with momentum. What? Stephen, taken aback, was met with cold stares from the parents-in-law and the relatives. Unable to bear the scrutiny, Stephen rushed into his room. Despite Stephen's absence, no one followed him. It seemed the relatives knew about Patricia's condition and even the men showed understanding. The parents-in-law immediately came to me, apologizing for their son's behavior, while the relatives admired the new house and praised my cooking. No one blamed me. They were impressed with the food and showered me with compliments. I began to enjoy myself as the painkillers started to work. After a while, I received an email from Stephen. It said that because of me, he couldn't enjoy the gathering at all. He wrote about being scolded by Paul and having no allies among the relatives, wondering why it all had to be him. I was annoyed he chose to email rather than call. As I contemplated how to respond, Patricia glanced at my phone. Seeing the message, and she stood up. Paul was seeing that, then asked, "What's going on?" Patricia snatched the mobile phone from me and handed it to Paul. When Paul looked at the phone, he also stood up, just like Patricia had. He still hasn't understood anything. It seems I need to take him home and re-educate him from the basics. Although unexpected, Paul and Patricia said this, looking at each other. Later, the relatives also agreed with the idea of re-educating Stephen, and they seemed fully committed to it. After a while, sensing the atmosphere, the relatives tactfully left, and Patricia went to Stephen's room and dragging him out. Both Paul and Patricia took Stephen by the arm, and he was led away without a chance to protest. About a week later, Stephen was taken back to his parents' house. I received an email from him. According to it, he mentioned that Patricia was making him extensively study about the female body and the difficulties of menstrual pain. He was being made to do household chores under Paul's supervision, assuming Patricia was in pain. The email sounded like complaints about balancing work and housework. I laughed when reading it. Thinking about how Paul and Patricia had said they would re-educate him from the basics, and it was really happening. I wondered if Stephen now understood a bit of my feelings, which made me smile. During this time, I took the opportunity to focus on my menstrual health. Following the relatives' advice that severe menstrual pain should be checked by a gynecologist, I visited the hospital while Stephen was away. Because of the advice on medication, daily routines, and precautions was helpful. Life without Stephen's comments was surprisingly comfortable. I could live at my own pace and lie on the sofa when I felt tired. It felt like a life where I could take care of myself. I somewhat hoped for more time like this. Partly due to Patricia's intervention, I enjoyed this slow-paced life and didn't reply to Stephen's emails. Few weeks later, when Stephen returned with his parents. The parents-in-law, who came straight to the dining table, made Stephen sit in a chair in front of them and pulled out a green paper from an envelope. It turned out to be a divorce application. I thought, could this really be a divorce right here and now? But Stephen was filling in the necessary information with a pen. Stephen began filling it out, and when he finished, Paul spoke solemnly. Mary, if Stephen ever behaves badly towards you again, feel free to submit this signed divorce application. Paul's eyes were serious, and Stephen's too. During our separation, Stephen was apparently re-educated by his parents-in-law and promised to change his behavior. Since then, Stephen has kept his promise, not showing arrogance and even willingly doing housework, especially during my period. Gradually, he stopped making derogatory comments about menstruation. Our life has become more peaceful, and I am relieved. From now on, I plan to live without overexerting myself, paying attention to my health, and taking care of myself.